Good day. This is Chris Miller with the Spiritual Artist Podcast. As you know, I've written the book called The Spiritual Artist, in which I chronicle my journey through art making and how it was sort of a spiritual experience. So today's guest is really interesting for me because he reached out to me from London, and his name is Dave Green, and he is a London-based lucid dream artist. What is that? I didn't know. So Dave recommended a book and I did some reading, but what a lucid dream artist is, it's someone who has a dream in which they know they're dreaming and can actually alter the dream itself. So on that, I'm so excited because Dave actually creates art in this state. So good morning, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on the show.
This is, like I said, this is very exciting. It's such a different topic. So I look forward to getting your feedback. I did, as you said, I purchased this book, which is just one of many, I imagine. And I have gone through and highlighted and dug into it. But I'm curious as to your process. How does one stumble upon painting or drawing in a dream?
Okay, so the lucid dreaming is something I had them fairly naturally. Even when I was a young child, didn't know there was a name for it. I had them, I used to get quite bad nightmares as a young child. And then at some point I learned how to wake myself up to stop the nightmare. And then further on from that, I thought, hang on, if I know it's a dream, I won't wake myself up. I'll just stay in the dream and sort of change the narrative of the dream. Later on, I heard about this thing called lucid dreaming, and I was like, hey, that's that thing that I do sometimes. And by that point, I was at college studying art, and it just seemed like an obvious thing to do. I was like, right, if I can be in a dream and consciously control it and do what I want, let's try and create an artwork in the dream, which I then recreate when I wake up. Because I always liked, I liked all the surrealists like Dali, Magritte, all those guys. But when I tried to depict my dreams, it was always a bit disappointing. But then the idea of actually creating something in a dream was really exciting, because then that isn't, there's something different going on there. It's not depicting the scenery of a dream you had. It's like literally something created in a dream. And I like to think my plan with it is try to, once I wake up, I try and create an exact replica as possible of the thing that I've created in the dream. Inevitably, there's a bit of a gap there because the way you see in dreams is very different. But it's I enjoy the challenge.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly my experience. When I was young, I would listen to I watched a lot of horror flicks, to be honest with you. I would watch all that Friday the 13th and all these horror flicks. And I started having really bad dreams because I would incorporate that violence into the dream. And I learned how to basically eject from the dream. And I've used that most of my life. So reading this book and talking to you, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And so I'll share that with you later. But last night I gave it a whirl where I did eject actually, but I came back. So, which is cool. But anyway, so is this process, I've seen your videos on YouTube, and you talk about how you've set up a room. So it's a little different than what I read in the book, but you set up a place where you actually can draw. So tell me how I think it's called priming the situations. Explain that process to our listeners a little bit.
Yeah, so I think what you've pointed at there is, you were saying that what I do seems a little bit different from what you've learned about the book. And that's because there's two main ways to have a lucid dream. There's dream-induced lucid dreaming, and there's wake-induced lucid dreaming. A dream-induced lucid dream I think that's a bit more usual. I think most people do that. And the way that works is you train yourself to recognize you're dreaming within a regular dream, right? So the way you do that is your journal, keep a dream diary of all your dreams, and you get to know the certain motifs and symbols that most frequently occur in your dreams, right? And that will be different for everyone. So you might dream about fire engines all the time, right? And after journaling your dreams for a while, you'll notice, oh, hey, I always dream about fire engines. And then you can use that knowledge that every time in waking life you see a fire engine, then you ask yourself, am I dreaming? Okay. And then if you do that regularly enough, eventually you'll be in a dream and you'll see a fire engine and you'll ask yourself, am I dreaming? And the answer will be yes. And you do what's known as a reality check. And the way they work is one of the key features of the dream world or the dreaming mind is the fact that everything's constantly changing, right? Nothing stays still for very long. So if you're in a dream, if you look at a piece of text and look away and then look back again, by the time you look back, the text will say something totally different. So you can use that feature of the dreaming mind to check whether or not you're dreaming. So you look at a bit of text in the dream, look away, look back. If it's changed, you know you're in a dream. If it hasn't, you're still awake and you've just embarrassed yourself in the supermarket or whatever. You have to be prepared to look a bit crazy doing this. So that's the dream-induced lucid dream. The one that I do is called wake-induced lucid dreaming. And that is slightly different in the way that you can think of it this way. And I think this is the way Daniel Love describes it in his book. A dream-induced lucid dream is adding awareness or adding a consciousness to a dream. And a wake-induced lucid dream is adding a dream to consciousness, right? And another way of saying that is in the wake-induced lucid dream, you start from a waking state, as the name suggests, and then you just sort of try and retain awareness as you fall asleep, right? So you have what's called as hypnagogia, which is it's not a full-on dream. It's sort of like you'll be aware of that as you're drifting off, you'll start seeing sort of random shapes. Sometimes it's quite abstract and just sort of dream imagery fluttering, on your eyelids, but you're not embodied within the dream, right? You're just sort of seeing it. And this, obviously everyone gets this, and it depends how, sometimes you might not be aware of it, but once you start consciously deciding to watch that, that's a sort of another realm of dreaming you can explore. And the idea is to pass through that state, retain awareness, and then you can enter a dream. And then it quite often takes the form of an experience of separating from your body, sort of an out-of-body experience type phenomena. And then you end up, more often than not always, but a lot of the time, you end up in a dream version of the environment you went to sleep in, right? So almost all my lucid dreams begin with me having the experience of separating from my body, and then I end up in a sort of a dream version of my bedroom. So that being the case, I try and set up my sort of induction methods I sort of gear those around that, the way my dreams are. So before I go to sleep, I lay a piece of paper and a pen on the desk next to my bed. And then I sort of do a practice run in waking life. So I'll pretend I'll get up out of my bed, I'll walk over to my desk and just sort of look at the paper and pen and just sort of look at that mindfully. And then I'll sort of tell myself, right, next time you're here, you're going to be in a dream. So be prepared to do a drawing. And I'll do that for sort of 10 or 15 minutes, then go to sleep. Then eventually I'll have the lucid dream. I'll be in a dream version of my bedroom. And I go to that desk and guess what? There's a pen and paper there. Why is it there? It's there because I expect it to be there, right? Lucid dreaming is all about expectation. You're wandering around your mind, essentially. So if you expect something to happen, then it will, within reason. Sometimes it surprises you and it gives you something a bit different. But especially with me, because I've done this process so many times, it sort of reinforces itself, right? So, and that also plays itself out in the way my drawings look, because the more I do a drawing in a certain style, the more I expect to see that in the dream, right? So the dream shows me more drawings in the style that I've already created. They're always a bit different. I mean, it changes every time. It's always a bit different. But lots of people ask me why they're all in black and white, and that there's a few reasons for that. The main reason is, again, is not, I can't control everything, but there are a few things I can try and influence. And one of them is I do try and draw. I dream in color, but I draw in with a black pen, if that makes sense, because I want to try and keep them simple so I can recreate them when I wake up. And I would like to introduce color one day, but I'm a bit conscious of the fact that once you introduce color, it's going to be a bit harder to remember everything. And there's always going to be a bit of interpretation involved, but by keeping it simple, I can be more sure that I've replicated what I've done in the dream. It's never totally precise, but by keeping it simple, I can keep it more precise.
Well, so what I hear is there are two different processes. It sounds like maybe I've done a little bit of both, like playing around with a little bit of both last night. And I would agree with you. I find that when I do try to make an effort to remember, it fades very quickly, you know, and I can see how introducing color would be such a challenge because, like I said, I tried it last night. I put a tablet next to my bed instead of in the other room. I just knew that I wouldn't get up. But I wrote a note on there, you know, to have the intention of remembering. But I think it was a little bit of both. I want to go back to that part where you said that state where images are flittering what did you call that?
Hypnagogia. There's hypnagogia and hypnopompia. One of them they're great words, aren't they?
Yeah.
One of them's as you fall asleep. One of them is the imagery you see as you wake up. I think hypnopompia is as you wake up.
So what happened with me last night is the hypnagogia, I guess is correct. As I woke up from a dream that I was having, which was a nightmare. And I thought, wait a minute, I can go back in there and I can change it.
Nice.
And so I did. I went back in there and changed it, which was with a hilarious outcome. But let me tell you about that dream. So I had this strange dream that I was with my husband and there was a huge tsunami wave coming on the ocean. And we were walking along the ocean and this huge wave came up and everybody started running inland. And the wave crashed down and was killing people. And we barely got out of the way in a drain pipe, right? Like in a drain pipe where we survived. And we went into a hospital where they were taking care of people. And I literally remember walking up to a doctor and patting him on the back, probably comes from COVID, and saying, good job for taking care of this person. There was a lady on a gurney with her dog next to her, like her dog was laying next to her. Yeah. But we look up at the sky and we see, and I think this came from one of your drawings because I was looking at your drawings last night. I see these huge like buses in the sky and they're collecting people. And it turns out it was some sort of aliens that were invading the planet. And when I saw that, and those buses looked sort of like you have some towers in one of your drawings, and I'll share that. Yeah. So I thought, oh, I don't like this. And I just ejected out of the dream. But what's funny is I woke up, like you said, realizing what was going on. I said, wait a minute, let's go back in there and let's play with this dream. And it's so strange. So I went back into the dream and I decided that by singing, we would kill the aliens. I kid you not. This probably comes from Invasion from Mars. But we started singing this song. I don't know if you know this old song that loving you is easy cause you're okay. So I started singing this really loud, la, 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 and the aliens started exploding.
Yeah. I can see why they wouldn't like that.
So the funny thing is, it was very humorous, as like you said, how you can step in and take charge of that dream and change the outcome. And suddenly the aliens were disappearing and retreating, you know. But I want to talk to you about this because that's a silly dream, and I think we all have them. Where does all that? What do you think? where does this stuff come from? You said you see drawings on the paper. Where's that coming from in your mind?
Whoa, that's a big question, man. I'm not trying to be dismissive here, but I don't know. I mean, there's loads of different theories about that. Yeah. And there's no consensus, amongst people who study this stuff. So, I'm talking about scientifically here. There's no real consensus of where that stuff comes from. Obviously, historically, dreams were, there would be it was taken as a given that it would relate to some sort of spiritual dimension. And obviously some people still see it that way. I like to keep it, to me, it's just very mysterious. And I kind of enjoy that about that. I enjoy that, lots of people try and interrogate me and say, what does that mean? What is it? And I quite like saying, I have no idea, because it's exciting for me. It's exciting for me when I see stuff. I'm like, what is that?
Well, it's like I was talking, just looking at that dream I had last night. I could see where pieces of it came from my daily life. And so I would imagine that is my subconscious.
Yeah.
Things that happen to myself. But then other things that were injected, I'm like, where did that come from? Things that pop up and that don't relate to anything that I consciously know about. And so it gets into that. Are we connecting to some greater mind, or is it just our subconscious mind? And same with your drawings. I mean, you have a wonderful drawing of your brother.
Oh yes,
and it's a great drawing, and that obviously came from your subconsciousness.
Yeah, I think that one is because what I was just saying there is usually I don't sort of interrogate the drawings too much for meaning, but that one you're referring to there is one of the few where the meaning did just jump out at me, because I had my twin brother passed away in infancy when we were both babies, and this image, maybe you can flash it up there, it's sort of a baby, but the face is kind of an adult face, and then it's got a flower coming out his head with sort of half its petals missing. And that was one of the ones where I saw that and I was like, okay, so that's quite clearly related to the memory of my brother, or at least that's how I interpreted it.
Did you feel that it was a calming image for you, a reassuring image, or?
It's hard to say, because that one I didn't really say this at the top of the interview, but that one was done a long time ago. So although I've really hit this process hard over the pandemic, I did actually start doing this technique when I was like 17 years old. And that one was done from way back then. So it's quite a long time ago. So it's, it would be hard for me to remember exactly how I felt. I think I sort of registered that it had something to do with my brother. And that image has always kind of stuck with me. And I've sort of recreated it for people every now and again, and sort of just shown them, hey, I drew this a long time ago. Well, that always stuck in my head as something sort of interesting.
So Dave, when I outline this in my book, but when I do step into the creative process, for me, I do get into a meditative state. I even recommend meditating before you go into your studio. And I believe that what I do is I'm turning off my higher consciousness. I'm turning off my critical mind. I'm turning off the mind that tells me right and wrong and what to do. And I kind of go down, when I paint, I release myself and go into subconsciousness, and let it just happen. And for me, it does feel like there is some power flowing through me. And so in the book, I tell people, you can call it whatever you want. Some people might call that God. Some people might just call it inspiration. Some people may call it flow. And as you said, I don't know if we can define it. I think it's a personal journey for everyone. Mm-hmm. But I do recognize that something is kind of flowing through me when I paint. Like this image behind me, I didn't sketch it out. I didn't predetermine it. I just started drawing shapes. And just in that place, in that meditative state, I just followed my will. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. And in a way, it's what you're doing, it's very different, but like how your process is very different. It's fascinating, but it is the same process of kind of getting out, letting your mind get out of the way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's definitely parallels there. I mean, you're sort of talking about it in regards to sort of the creative process broadly, but I would say that, yeah, my attitude is the same in that I don't know for sure where the content of dreams is coming from. I wouldn't say for sure that it's coming from, some other place, but it definitely feels like that.
Yeah.
And the same with what you're saying. And, and it almost, it's not that it doesn't matter, because obviously that sort of, these metaphysical arguments are fascinating, but in terms of, it's just maybe a useful way to think about it, regardless of whether it's true or not. In sort of what you're saying, and let's do a painting, let's, sort of put the creative process in the hands of something bigger than yourself. And that's kind of how I look at dreams in a way. Definitely, like, because when I do sort of, I've started doing portraits of people in the dream as well. So I'll meet specific people in my dream, create a portrait of them, and then recreate that when I wake up. And I can't, I do slip into that language of saying like, oh, I got this from my dream the other night, so it does sort of, I don't know, man, who knows?
Well, they say, so much of us is in our subconsciousness, our operating brain is handling a little bit, but underneath. So our behaviors we're kind of pre-wired by the way we're raised, by the values of our society, and we follow those rules. We follow those rules through life. But when we're creative, we're going down into a deeper level of subconsciousness. And I want to go back to what you said about that drawing with your brother. I do think as an artist, we create what's called symbology, symbols that represent who we are. And the flower coming out from the shape of the child, that it might be a symbol to you, and it represents something to you. Case in point, Basquiat, he did all those mural drawings, and he would keep going back to a crown. I don't know if you remember. He always used to, if you can identify his work, because sure enough, buried back in there is a crown. Somehow that crown must mean something to him.
Yeah.
Because he keeps returning to it. And so I think you're right. You were saying earlier that each time you draw, it's almost like you're building on that. You're building on the history, which is fascinating,
Yeah, man. And I think what I find, the same symbols every now and again come up again. And I think as I do more and more, I've done sort of over 100 of these drawings over the last year or so. And I'm finding this sort of accumulative, because they're very quick to do. So I'm finding like, just this endless thing that keeps sort of unraveling. And I think sort of looking at a lot of them together is, I find that interesting. And sort of noticing sort of patterns in them and stuff is.
Because there is a pattern in us. I teach that in class, that we have symbols, or we have tools in our toolbox that are native to us, shapes that are native to us. And that's why when I teach the creative process, I have people scribble on a piece of paper, and suddenly they'll find out that they might prefer boxes, or they might gravitate towards hearts or crowns or words. Some people love words. They fall in love with words, and they can do art just based on words. And so it's that process of finding out what's unique to you,
Yeah.
And there was a symbol in this book with Daniel Love. One of the things I thought was interesting, the parallel, is he talks about identifying when you are in a dream, being able to identify it's a dream, because we often have, I don't know about you, but I often have the same location. Like I have certain dreams that happen over and over again. I have a koi pond. It's a big, beautiful koi pond, but I dream about koi fish. And a lot of times the dream will be the water is running low, or the fish are being eaten, or they're flooding and getting out. And so to me, I think when people analyze their dreams, as they go through with your process too, they should be open to what the symbols are for them. You know,
Oh yeah.
that's why I don't think someone else can come to you and say, I don't like when someone says, oh, you dreamed about a crown. Well, that means that you want to be rich. You can't
Yeah.
you can't tell someone else what their symbolism is.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I would agree with you there. I think there's not many people that take that kind of approach these days. Like, yeah, you mean the sort of dream dictionary that you get?
Yeah.
This always means this. And yeah, I don't think that's true. I think my, it's endlessly complex topic, isn't it? The meaning of dreams. But I think my kind of approach to that is I'm more interested in the dynamics of the dream. And what I mean by that is, and I guess I'm talking about specifically lucid dreaming here. Like this is something, and you spoke about a bit in your dream there, like you, with the wave, like you knew it was a bad dream and you went back in and changed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a really concrete example of, something you can do in a lucid dream that has a positive effect, right? That's kind of quite empowering. And I always use the example of, there's a very common one that lots of people have. So one of the most common dreams you can have is to be being chased by some sort of monster, right? And if you do lucid dreaming, you can be being chased by a monster and then you think, oh, hang on, this is a dream. And then you can turn around and face that monster, and almost always it'll just turn into, like a little teddy bear or something, like not only not threatening, but something positive. And I'm less interested in sort of analyzing what that monster was and going, I was a dinosaur, so this means this and this means that. And it turned into a teddy bear, so this means it. I'm more interested in the fact that I actually turned around and faced it. Do you know what I mean? Because that's something concrete you can get from that. Do you hear what I mean? Rather than analyzing. Another way, a more simple way of saying that is that I'm almost more interested in the feelings and the tones of emotion within a dream rather than the content, in a way, because that sort of, you can't be wrong about the way you felt, but you could easily be wrong about how you interpret it. Does that make sense?
No, that makes wonderful sense. It's sort of like, I sat down and after I read the book, I was like, why do I dream about koi fish? And it's obviously based on a fear. The emotion is fear of loss, or fear that I can't take care of something that's in my charge. And so you're right, being able to just turn around. This is a lesson for dreams as well as in life, to just face the fear, turn around and erase it. Just erase it.
Yeah. There's lots of lessons to be learned there. But I just think you can go down a rabbit hole of, if you try to dissect things too much. I think, not that it's always problematic, but I think you can quite easily just end up in a maze of your own mind, and it can't always be that helpful. So I'm more interested in the sort of dynamics and the emotions more than the symbols. But obviously my artwork is full of symbols and shit. But I just like to go, wow, what is that? I don't know. I just
you just like to leave it up to the viewer. Is that
kind of, yeah? I mean, exactly. It's that's not to say that I never have little sort of ideas about what they might mean, but I guess I'm kind of in a strange position because I'm doing it. I'm creating this art, and it's, I find it interesting, but it's also, I'm sharing it with other people. So, I mean, that one with my brother, I was quite willing to put a meaning on that one, but I'm not sure where it'd get me to every single drawing I do, create a drawing and then say, well, this means when my girlfriend dumped me or whatever. I think it's just more interesting, apart from anything, just to leave it.
Well, I wanted to ask you that. I'm curious, have you ever set an intention to get an answer? Have you ever been struggling? I'm sure our listeners would love this too. Have you ever been dealing with something in life that's challenging and you need help? Have you ever said, okay, when I go to bed, I want an answer to this problem?
Not really. I haven't used it so much for that. I think for me, it's very much, lots of lucid dreamers do that, but it's not something I've explored so much. I mean, this is what's fascinating about lucid dreaming. It's this sort of landscape, and everyone uses it in totally different ways. There's people who use it to, there's like athletes who use it to like practice their technique, like do physical exercises, or, you know, there's a million ways you can use it. I use it almost entirely to create these artworks. And when I'm not doing that, what I like to do that is also very interesting is to meditate in the dream, which is a fascinating thing to do. Because if you think about it, the dream is comprised of, you know, the content of your mind. So if you sit down and meditate in a dream, it's sort of the same dynamics at play when you meditate in waking life, but you can see it visually, right? So as your mind stills, things sort of like move away and disappear. But then you get, you know, when you're meditating and you'll get like a, you know, you will get a little sort of thought nagging at you. In the dream, if you sit down and meditate, you'll get dream characters, the other people in the dream. They'll sort of come up and try and sort of snap you out of it. Because this, in the same way, you know, your mind doesn't want to settle. So that the people who inhabit your dream will try and sort of not let you meditate. It's fascinating. It's
so you just send them away. How do you send them away? Do you just not?
Well, so it's different every time. Sometimes they'll get my attention, and then I'll slip. That's the thing with lucid dreaming. It's sort of like a spectrum. So you can have various degrees of lucidity. So you can gain lucidity. You can realize it's a dream, but then something will distract you, and you can slip back into a regular dream. So that can happen sometimes. A dream character might come up, start irritating me, and then I forget I was meditating, and then I forget and then I'll just end up in a regular dream. And it's different every time.
So explain that a little bit more, because I've been focusing on meditation lately. So how do you meditate in that situation?
You do, it's exactly as you would in waking life. You just sit down. Although I would say, and again, it's hard to, you know, tell people what because it'll be different for everyone. But what I realized is, this is something that a few people have tried. So someone else told me about it. I tried to do it. And the first couple of times I sat down in the dream on a dream chair and I closed my eyes, but then I just woke up. Because the sort of less you engage your senses in the dream, the more likely you are to wake up. So because I cut off the visual field, I woke, because that's how I meditate in waking life. But then at some point I realized, no, keep your eyes open. And then, and then I just did exactly what I would do in waking life, but with my eyes open. But in terms of that, engaging your senses, that's a tip for lucid dreamers out there. If the dream starts fading, if you think you're going to wake up, just put your arms out and start spinning around, because that way you're engaging all your senses. So it keeps your body engaged in the reality of the dream.
Oh, that's
Does that make
cool.
sense? Yeah.
I've never done it. No, I bet it makes sense.
There you go, man. Can I say, by the way, I didn't say this before. It's great that you not only read that book that I recommended, but that you put it into practice and had a lucid dream straight away. You haven't even finished the book and you had a dream, man. That's fantastic.
Well, I did, like you said, I set the intention, you know, before I went to sleep. So there's a second part. So that was the I'm mutilating these. That was one type of dream. But when I woke up, I did the second one where I started going back into the dream and had the vision of images flying through my face. And I saw an image of a simple line drawing, like how you draw, of a rabbit. And the rabbit,
that was me.
Yeah. Maybe listen to this. This is so strange. It was a little rabbit and it was facing me. So when I woke up, I just wrote down real quick in my log, a bunny looking. It was such a simple image. I knew that I could recreate it. It wasn't some of your images are so delightfully detailed. I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth in my. Not at this point. You have so much experience with it, so I don't have the bandwidth.
Well, no, those ones, the complicated ones are, I mean, most of I mean, like a lot of artists these days, my main way of sharing this with people is on Instagram. So I kind of share the pictures and then I sort of write long descriptions. So depending how much you've dug into my stuff, those more complicated ones, there's a lot of guesswork in that. And I don't know, I get in these weird, there are some decisions to be made, because I try and keep it simple, but then sometimes I just see something incredibly complex. So then I'm like, what do I do? Do I just ignore that? Do I do a very simplified version, or do I just do my best to recreate it? So there's complex ones and me doing my best to recreate it, but they'd be very, be very far removed from what I actually saw. Whereas the more simple ones, like your bunny, they're more easy to recreate.
Well, here's the funny thing. So let's go back to that conversation where, is it our subconscious, or are we speaking to something? Or is there something talking to us? So there was a second part to that. So I saw the rabbit, and then I saw the words. And usually you're right, it is hard for me to remember words, but I knew it said "born in the valley."
Cool.
Born in the valley. And I saw the YouTube logo. Get this.
Great.
So I'm going to tell you something very strange. So I went onto YouTube and I typed in those words this morning. And sure enough, there is a song written, and it's by the Oh Hellos. I've never heard of them. The Oh Hellos. And this freaked me out. The song came up, their logo.
Oh, wow.
Their logo. I just went, I tell them, I'm like, there's a bunny and it's looking at me. And
wow.
it's a simple logo. I have never heard of this group. And I think they're actually from Texas, but I've never even heard of them. It's a newer group. I never heard, it's not music that I'd listen to. So this is where I get into, well,
interesting.
Should I listen to them? Is something telling me that I should tap into this musical group, or when we dream, did I just reach into some sort of universal consciousness and pull this out? Just, like random, like you were saying, random images,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I thought about all this stuff endlessly, and depending on what day you ask me, I'll give you a different answer. But yeah, I mean, I've had a few experiences like that. I'm generally quite skeptical about that stuff. But then, as you said, I mean, as with that example, yeah, that is quite striking.
Don't you think that's the strange thing? I mean, this wasn't something in my, of course I have bunny images in my mind. When I was a kid in third grade, my teacher would have us draw rabbits, I swear. But this was a specific rabbit in a specific posture, and it was standing and looking at me. And then to hear the words. So, I wonder if we aren't able to tap into something, something that we're all connected to. That's my belief. I don't, and Dave, I don't believe I don't like the terminology, a greater power or another. I believe it is a power that we're all connected into.
Yeah. I totally get you, man. I've sort of, I'll tell you something interesting. Since I've been doing these artworks, I've reached out to a few sort of academics in various fields who I thought might be interested in it, and I'd be interested to hear their take on it. Sort of psychologists, philosophers, this kind of stuff. And through doing that, I've ended up doing an experiment into a precognitive dreaming, which is dreams that tell the future, which obviously for that to exist, you would need some sort of model of consciousness or reality, similar to what you're talking about. And yeah, I kind of went into it skeptically, and it's probably a bit early doors to talk about this because it's not.
We won't hold you to it, Dave.
There's nothing. And I would love to stress that I went into this, and I'm still on the skeptical side of this stuff. But we did a pilot study where I had to. So every week for 5 weeks, I went into a lucid dream and tried to view it was actually a photograph she was sending me, but more often than not, because I'm so used to seeing things in drawings, it would look like a drawing. And the next day, the scientists sent me a photograph from a random image generator, right? So I did that 5 times over 5 weeks. And then an independent judge had to come in and he had to match up the images that I drew to the photographs. and it was matched, and the idea, if you could match, this week to the, it would point to the fact that those dreams were looking a day into the future. And they matched 3 out of the 5, which apparently is that's a 1 in 60 chance that would happen by chance. And that's only the pilot. We're going to go on and do a full study. And I'm almost, as I say, because I'm quite skeptical, and I'm always like, it's weird now I'm talking about it publicly, but I said to the scientists, I'm doing the experiment with, I don't know, it's a weird territory to get into, because it's, what I'm doing with this process is, it's getting a little bit of attention online. But if it, I'm not sure if I want it to be about Dave, the guy that can see the future, because it becomes a very
scary
different thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that's quite ironic saying that, seeing as I've just said it on your podcast, but I think what I've decided to do is just, I guess what I'm doing now is just, talk about it very openly and sort of, explore this stuff scientifically. I'm open to doing that.
I think it sounds fascinating, but what I like to do is the same thing when I create a painting. I don't take all the responsibility for it. Someone will look at a painting and go, wow, Chris, how did you do that? And I'll be like, well, whatever, it was spirit, or, it was not just me, it was the connection. And so it is a nice, it's a nice release in a way, because it's like, okay, it's not all my control. I'm just letting it happen through me. And the same thing with you. You're just letting it happen through you. And so there's a relief in that, actually.
Oh,
yeah. And I'm sure nobody will hold you to it, but I think it sounds like a fascinating experiment. I mean, are we connected? Are we connected through our thoughts? There is a book out right now. I don't know if you've seen it. I've been reading it. I wish it was more supported with science. It's called The Power of 8. And it talks about groups of 8 people praying for something, and can they make change? And she did this big experiment, several experiments, where she actually had large groups of people like praying for peace in the Middle East or something. I don't see her science backing it up. I really don't. But the concept, the idea of it in the book is that there is a connection. We are all connected in our thoughts as well. And so I think the dream is just another way of reaching us, I want to share one other thing with you though, Dave, because I did it last night, and I got up this morning and I was like, whew, that was a lot of work.
All right.
Do you feel tired? Does it tire you out a little bit? Do you limit how much you do?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the number one question I get asked, actually, because lots of people think of sleep as a time where you just switch off or whatever. And as you found out for yourself, it can be a bit tiring. I think that's probably it, and it's an aspect of lucid dreaming that I think lots of people who talk about it publicly will play down, because the people that teach it, obviously, because they've got they want to portray it as all positive, right? But it can make you a little bit tired. But lots of things can make you a bit tired. Going out and having fun can make you tired as well. But
everything.
No reason not to do it. But yes, it can. I think I've got more into a rhythm of it a bit now. Like at the start of doing this process, I would do the drawing, and I would, about 4 o'clock, 5 a.m. And I'd be so excited about what I'd drawn, I couldn't get back to sleep. So it's a bit tricky. Like, do you blame that on lucid dreaming? It's hard to say, really. Or do you it's kind of a separate thing. Because now I've got more used to it. I can do a drawing and I go, that's the drawing, and then just go back to sleep. And it's kind of got into my routine a little bit more. But there's an important thing to point out there, like I think in the West, we've become so detached from our dream life. People just dismiss dreams as, just nothing, and we sort of think of going to sleep as a time where, you just switch off and nothing happens. If you do a scan of someone's brain while they're dreaming, in REM sleep, where most dreams happen, your brain activity is very similar to that when you're awake. Your brain's, there's all sorts of stuff going off. It's incredible. So, and that's happening every night you go to sleep, regardless of whether you're lucid or not. So, you hear what I'm saying? Your brain is very awake every night when you go to sleep. So.
Well, I wish I remember the name of the book. There's another book on your neural mind and how your mind has to work. Your brain has to work. That's the reason we have it. It's a muscle. It's like, you talk about if you use it or you lose it. Mm-hmm. Your brain has to keep working, and that's one of their explanations for dreaming. I think you're right. We should be aware of it. For even on the most simplistic level, if I recognize that I have repetitive patterns in my dreams, if I recognize that koi fish are a repetitive pattern, then I can look at it, like you said, from the emotional place, from a feeling place, and say, I need to have more confidence that things are taken care of, or I can address that issue in my life, that I don't have to take care of everything. I don't have to take care of the fish. So I think there's lessons in there to listen to, even as basic as symbology, and even if it's from your basic subconscious and no other, like you said.
Yeah. Definitely. It's it also depends in regards to making you tired or whatever. It also depends what you're doing. Because if you do, you could use it. I guess talking about the more spiritual side of it, you could, and people do use lucid dreaming purely as a spiritual practice. And I guess, meditating in your dream would be an example of that. If you made it your goal every time you became lucid in your dream to meditate, I'm sure that would do you a world of good. So it depends what you're doing. And what I'm doing with the artwork, is a really rewarding process in some ways, but in some ways it does feel a little bit like work. So maybe that side of it. And as I said, I think I am getting a bit better at that, actually. And I've just sort of detached myself from whatever I draw. That's whatever I draw. So I guess, maybe that's something, sort of my waking life attitude, where I shouldn't be like, oh, I drew this. What does this look like? I can't wait to put that on Instagram.
Right.
That's probably not very healthy. So
no,
it's the way they interact with each other. It's your waking life attitude feeds into your dream feeds into your waking life. Yeah. And you want to marry those two things together. It depends what you're doing in your dream. That will have an effect on, your sort of.
I think for me, it was what made me tired was just putting myself on alert. Before I go to bed. Normally, when I go to bed, I'm just like, and in this case, I was like, okay, be sensitive to it, watch for it. Like he talked about, look for the signs, check my watch in the dream. See if I'm reading numbers and words. And so it's like getting all hyped up. But like any skill, and that is in the mind skill, any skill that if you practice it, it does get easier. The more you do it. So you have trained yourself that it isn't as tiring, and that's great.
Yeah, it's more in my routine now. Yeah.
So for someone listening to this that's never done this before, what would your advice be, or for them to get started, or how should they approach this?
It's funny because lots of I would make a really bad teacher because lots of the advice I give, I don't actually do. But, because the number one thing that there's lots of different people who teach this, and the number one thing that they all agree on is that you need to keep a dream journal, and because you need to keep track of your dreams. You need to know the landscape in order to become lucid. And that's why I say I'm a bad teacher, because I've managed to do it. I get away without keeping a dream journal, but everyone seems to agree that's the best way to start out, and keep track. But that being said, I guess doing the drawings for me is a way of, I guess I'm sort of tuned into my dreams in that way. Yeah. So maybe it's sort of visual. So maybe I'm being a bit unfair on myself there. That is a form of journaling, I guess. But I guess my point is I'm not maybe I've got so into the sort of lucid dreaming, I'm not as in tune with my regular dreams as some sort of practitioners might be. But yeah, so I'd say keep a dream journal, start doing reality checks throughout the day. And this, I would say here as well that we were talking a bit there, lucid dreaming can make you a little bit tired. There's a lot of hype about the people, I think is a very sort of unknown territory still. So I think there can be a bit of hype about the sort of well-being sort of aspects of lucid dreaming. But I would say, to counter that, my opinion is, although the jury's kind of out on, the therapeutic qualities of lucid dreaming itself, I would say personally, the things you do throughout the day, the practices that you do around lucid dreaming are very positive, I think. Because if you stop for an hour a day and just look around and ask yourself if you're dreaming, that is basically it's essentially a mindfulness technique, right?
Yes.
So all these practices that you do to develop lucid dreaming, they do have a very positive effect, actually. And there's a guy called Andrew, I'm not sure how you pronounce his surname, Andrew Holecek. He's American, and he is one of the #1 experts on what's known as dream yoga. And dream yoga is just another word for lucid dreaming, but that's what lucid dreaming would be called in the Buddhist tradition. So obviously that is, in the context of a spiritual practice. And he's written a book called, I'm not sure of the title, but it might be called Daytime Dreams. And the gist of it is all about, the sort of daytime practices and the fact that, so that's taken it to a whole next level, because that is, it's about mirroring the things you do in the dream and then bringing that into waking life, and, and the two feed into each other. And I think, and there's obvious, you can obviously see why, if you know a little bit about Buddhism, you can obviously see why this lucid dreaming practice would be a useful thing to do. Because I think the idea there is that if you realize if you can be in a dream and realize that is just a dream, you can also apply that to this reality, and then this is just a dream. It's this fascinating stuff.
No, I do think it's fascinating. I think, in the book, they talk about how in the dream you can control things by your thoughts. And I'm like, yeah, that's also in life. We in our lives, when we get up in the morning, we control things by our thoughts. I think in this platform, it's slower. The results are slower to happen. Like in a dream, I immediately could start singing and the aliens were dying. But in life, there are things you can change in how you think. It's a little slower. It's on the material world, but it does come back at you, and it changes your life. So I agree with you. There's such an interesting, wow, I was reading the book. There were so many parallels to just living a good life. And he also mentions a trigger. I talked about symbols that happen, but he also mentioned a trigger is emotion. Whenever you feel a lot of emotion, you should go, am I dreaming? And isn't that a good practice?
Exactly. Yeah, that'll have, even if you do all those practices and never even have a lucid dream, have them less frequently than you would like, they will still have very positive effects, as you've just pointed out. Yeah. If every time you get angry, you ask yourself, am I dreaming? It's essentially another way of just being more mindful of your surroundings.
Well, I appreciate having you on the podcast. It's been interesting. There's so many layers to this as we talk about it. I will invite the listeners to check out your YouTube page and look at some of your art. It's wonderful. And also your Instagram page, I think, even has more imagery, I thought, on it.
Yeah, it's got a lot more. Yeah, I haven't, because lots of them are for, the majority of what I do is sort of the personalized ones where I meet specific people. So they don't go on my website because they're just that person.
They don't.
That's what I was saying about before. And I'm making a video of this now, so it's really in my mind. I do portraits. So I meet people. So if I was doing one for you, for example, I would incubate, or I would aim to have a dream about you. I'd meet you in my dream, and then I hold a piece of paper up to your face, and then a drawing appears on it. So there'd be a weird sort of dream drawing of Chris, and then I recreate that when I wake up. So they're sort of like portraits, but they don't look anything like people. Sometimes they do a bit, but it's just sort of random symbol that relates.
I think that sounds really cool.
Yeah,
So
fun.
that's neat. All right. Well, I will. I'm glad you reached out to me. It's been fascinating, like I said, and I love playing with it. I don't know if I do it every night, but it is, when you consciously want to do it, it's certainly a neat practice. And it does, the book itself, or any book on this, it does help you in day-to-day living. So,
Great.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And we'll talk. All right. Thanks again.